we've been me and Niko, we've been together in New Hampshire during a primary, and Niko's no stranger to also the DNC lawsuit. And Don, we did a show talking about the DNC lawsuit, and I think a lot of people, they kind of get a sense of what the Democratic Party has always said they can do, and what they want to do. That the fact there is no such thing as a Democrat, that they can go into the back room full of cigar smokes and pick who they want. But I think it's sometimes lost the fact that Bernie Sanders suspended the rules and by acclamation gave Hillary Clinton a nomination. And let's also be honest, Niko House brought that lawsuit up. Bernie Sanders wasn't behind it. So I think some of us who were very disappointed in RFK running as a Democrat still thought, well, hey, will it be different this time if he joins the lawsuit? Are there other ways around this? And let's also understand the fact that they said notwithstanding. So it's not like they okayed what the Democratic Party did. They said, we're just not going to touch it. Is that a fair assessment, Niko and Don?
Well, God, you want to, Niko, but
go ahead, Don. No, go ahead.
Yeah, the court. The most recent thing I read was the Supreme Court reviewing the appeals court and blah blah, and they say in essence, okay, look, there are these two conflicting areas of law that we're looking at. On the one hand, the courts have and the system generally has favored a two-party system. And they said even evidence of this is the fact that all of the lawsuits brought by third parties saying, basically, I'm going to speak in colloquial terms, that this is unfair and a violation of due protection and et cetera, have failed. The courts and the system in general favor a duopoly, and therefore these two interests, and I'll tell you the trick in there in a minute, these two interests are more or less the custodians of our electoral system, and that's okay with us. And then they go to the other side and say, in essence, and this is the reason that among the reasons that the plaintiffs in this case were found to not have standing, people think when they enroll as a Democrat that they're joining like this organization, like a corporation or a membership association or something. Hi, I'm a Democrat. You're a Democrat. We're all Democrats. Those guys on top, somehow we put them there because they're like the officers of this thing called the Democratic Party or whatever. And in fact, you're not. You're enrolling as a member of a political party that isn't really a membership association. And so the bylaws these people make up here are not for this organization that you're a part of. Those bylaws are for them. And so if they violate them, if they change them, if et cetera, you have no standing to complain about it. We don't want to hear it. It's not your business. That's basically what they said. Now, here's the wrinkle. That entity that is unaccountable is half, and the other one's in the same condition legally, is half of who's in charge of our elections. So there are these two small circles of people who get to pick the candidate for president in any way that they want, basically. And that's what we're dished up from year to year to year. And they get favored treatment from the system, including the courts, as against any candidates that we might scramble to get on the ballot, like was done with Nader, Cynthia McKinney, et cetera. So that, to me, is the essential part of that whole case. I'm sure there's more.
Niko, go ahead.
So there was also so Judge Locke said that effectively he didn't recognize what he called the trivialization of their own charter. And he said it was a jurisdictional issue. And then like the appellate court talked about the standing and all that good stuff. But like there, I don't know. It was almost like from everything I've read and remember, there were so many conflicting reasons as to why they kept kicking the can down the road. That didn't even make any sense because the DNC technically is a corporation. And then but once you buy membership to that corporation, when you become a 501c4, for example, your charter, you do have to abide by it in reference to the members who are paying to be a part of it.
Right.
That's already been a thing. The DNC literally, the Democratic Party lost that huge lawsuit in the past when they were trying to stop a black man from running because of that. Because they just couldn't do it. They were trying to control their primary. They said they had the right to control their primary, who can and can't vote in it, who can and can't run in, et cetera, et cetera. And then the courts ruled against them in that. Jared actually used it as precedence in this case. So even though you might have like one judge say that, oh, you don't, the people don't that are paying to be a part of that membership don't actually have any standing and with that company, but there has to be a charter somewhere, or else there's no membership to be had. Does that make sense? Like legally speaking,
Yeah.
There's no member, or like you're not just giving money to some, because if you are just giving money and they aren't legitimate in any legal or legal business corporate sense, like then it's illegal and that's a whole other lawsuit. So the findings, or excuse me, the verdicts don't really make any sense for the dismissal, which is also part of the frustration that people have, is that there doesn't seem to be any consistent thing other than, we're just going to keep propping up the duopoly and we'll make any excuse we can to justify it.
Yeah. They were saying also in there, because it's along those lines too, the courts are, not anxious. They decline or refrain from interfering in how, like a membership association, for example, operates because of the principle of freedom of association. And
which is crazy.
The thing that was distinguishing in the case you cited is that, in essence, the reason they were denying him a place on the ballot, and it was provable with 1,000 different, a bunch of other examples, it was racist intent. And that was considered, void as against public policy, that this thing, you're not allowed to do this no matter what you call yourself doing. And that was an element to that case, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't read it in a long time.
It was, but the whole point was, so basically what the point was is though that, so you can't just do what you want to do just because it's your primary.
Right. Which is that's
like
cute.
Like, you could say like, oh, there's the racism aspect of it. With Bernie, could have been, oh, there was prejudice. I mean, obviously this argument wasn't being made, but the prejudice of independence. But the fact of the matter is the courts have already ruled that they will interfere with the primary if they deem it necessary.
Right.
Like that's like, once again, that's the problem, right? It's like,
that's cute.
When you're talking, especially when we get to federal judges, we're talking about federal judges, people. I can't stress enough how much like they know that whoever wins between the Democrats and the Republicans is likely going to be their next boss.
Yeah.
That's
so,
right.
And it's also a system that's put them into office too as well.
Yeah,
So to discredit it,
Yeah.
this is something that Don has brought up before, and I think that's very important. And I also want to dismiss the fact that just because it was Bernie Sanders followers and not Bernie Sanders, that didn't have a lot of precedence, because we've known and we've seen so many cases before in the past just automatically get shot down when it comes to elections. It's like, judges don't want to touch it, including Donald Trump. But isn't there some merit to the fact that Bernie Sanders suspended the rules, and by acclamation, didn't he in some way make this case moot?
Just before you go there, to put a button on this last thing, the real cute thing, if you look at the distinguishing factor here, we will not interfere in the case of it being crooked. We will interfere in the case of it being racist or this and that. So we have the power. A crooked political system, no problem.
We're good with that. Right. But so Pasta, the only reason I would say no is specifically because the way we started the lawsuit before we had even gotten to that point.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the distinguishing factor. Like you mentioned that there have been other candidates and it just keeps getting thrown out. The distinguishing factor is all those candidates, they didn't start their lawsuit until after they were already cheated and the results were already in.
Yeah.
So
this
it was like a grievance
in June, right?
Yeah, something like that. Some May or
Yeah.
June. And with candidates is they thought they were cheated and therefore they wanted to do an audit, et cetera, et cetera. We were giving concrete examples of exactly how people were cheated out of like literal, like their money, right? Their money, their time, their labor, their effort, et cetera, et cetera. It was beyond Bernie Sanders getting cheated, and more so those who are paying members of the DNC, or at least members of this nonprofit organization. They were expecting the charter to be adhered to, and that charter was violated, and therefore the can't, but whether it be, because it wasn't just in my opinion, it wasn't just Bernie supporters that got cheated. Democrats lost because Bernie didn't win.
Yeah,
I think that everybody
lost because Bernie didn't win it.
Really. Literally. And now obviously I have my problems with Bernie now, but like Could he have been as horrible as Biden? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. And at the bare minimum, a lot of progressives across the board would have probably piggybacked off of that victory and that success.
Yeah.
And we could have seen some legitimate changes, albeit, maybe not as extreme as we would like, but it couldn't have been worse than Biden. Like,
maybe War Powers Act.
Think so? Yeah. Do you guys think that though a lot of people? Sorry, go ahead, Don. You were saying no. Go ahead, Don. Go.
Maybe somebody would have called them on the War Powers Act, for example, if he tried to start a war with Russia. Because there's not a peep in that whole. I don't even hear Barbara Lee talking about that. Okay, and I don't hear. When you hear Captor talking about it, she's chiming in how much more money you need to send to Ukraine, and so it might have been different if he had done that. I'm sorry, that's.
No, it was it was very disgusting being over in Lahaina, seeing these people suffer, and then seeing a picture of Dick Blumenthal, Elizabeth Warren, and of course Lindsey Graham hugging with Zelensky in Kiev. Here's a question I have for you guys, real quick. Do you think that? And I want to hear from. I'd like to hear from Don first on this one. Do you think people lost the plot when they invested so much, emotional energy into the fact that Bernie Sanders lost rather than concentrating on the election system itself? You're close with Cynthia McKinney. We understand this game. All of us over here, we understand elections, not like everybody else. I think the sad thing is when I see people like Kyle Kulinski and Brianna Joy Gray, and Brianna didn't bring it up, it was more Kyle Kulinski and Crystal saying, well, we need ranked choice voting. It's like, well, I don't think you guys have paid attention to the system as a whole. Ranked choice voting or not, if we don't have a chain of custody, if there's proprietary software counting our votes, if this is just all over the place. And I know I had the luxury of seeing elections in other countries to say, wow, this is how an election.
First of all, I would say it was a luxury. You were working. Let's not get twisted.
Well, I mean, to able to see a system that actually works where transparency and the chain of custody is all within the visualness of the people. They get to see it. It's in front of them. They don't have to trust anybody. They have to trust their own eyes because everything is in front of them. Don, your opinions, did people miss the plot and not pay attention to election system itself rather than the fact that Bernie lost?
So I was on RBN the other day specifically talking about this because they were like ranked choice voting got us Eric Adams, and people keep seeming to forget that, right? Eric Adams in New York. People don't understand at the end of the day, ranked choice voting doesn't mean anything if you still have proprietary software, because at the end of the day, if it's a Democratic precinct in a Democratic district, guess who's counting the votes?
Yeah,
it's Democrats. And you have some rules in ranked choice voting where if you decide not to vote for that, because I would not cast a vote for Eric Adams. Period. No, like, what's the rank? He's not ranked. Well, guess what happens? Your ballot gets thrown out. That's what happens in a lot of these situations. And I would say, I know that if you have a thriving transparent, accountable electoral system, that it is almost unbeatable and uncorruptible. You want to know how we know? Because we literally watch the United States do all this work to commit a coup in Bolivia. And guess what the fuck happened? They didn't have to go to war with nobody. They didn't have to say, they're like, hey man, we just gonna vote again. And everybody's like, what? You're really gonna try to vote your way out of this? Have you looked at the states and looked at, don't worry about it, we got it. The very next election, everybody was like, the rightful people were right back in power, because that is what happens when you have a secure voting system. And that's also why you see the U.S. fight so hard to ensure that it can never happen across the board. That's why they fight so hard, because they don't want that. Like, with all the corruption that took place in Bolivia, they could pull somebody out, but they could not get who they wanted back in legitimately. Right. It is that legitimacy that they use, obviously, to pass all these ridiculous policies and maintain a mandate for that. But I know it can be done because we've seen it. But it's like what Pazza said. The fuck are they focusing on? They're not focusing on the right thing. But that's on purpose, though.
Yeah. That's, so Bolivia is an excellent example. Venezuela, 2002, the coup there is an excellent example. They accomplished shepherding Hugo Chavez out, wherever they were going to take him, to push him out of a helicopter, whatever they had planned for him. And the people came down to the presidential palace and they demanded that they bring him back. And those people, the fools, decided to occupy it before they were able to secure. They couldn't have secured it because the whole people came down there, and they were trapped. They would have strung them up if they didn't produce them. It would, justifiably, in my opinion.
Because they have faith in their election system. They know who they voted for.
Yeah, that's right.
They have that confidence. Yeah.
And when you see everybody come down, everybody that's upset that the guy I voted for, it was just illegally taken out. And when you see that everybody is like the whole damn town, you don't have to take your shoes off to do that arithmetic. It's pretty clear what's going on. To answer the question, in terms of people, losing the narrative or whatever, you can't fault them because they're being read like, a bedtime story. I mean, part of this lawsuit also, which you don't see published anywhere, and it should have been a significant controversy for a lot longer than Russiagate, was the fact that you were talking about the money that was raised deceptively. This is what was alleged, and as a matter of fact, nobody challenged that factual assertion. They were just saying you didn't have to in court and blah blah blah, but you didn't have the right to bring this. But they were talking about $258 million. Okay, and they were saying that this money was obtained using fraud to induce us to make the contributions. You told us you were running an open and honest process, and you didn't. And we gave money and thousands of hours of our time to work for this candidate who, in fact, did not have a chance.
And that's not conjecture, by the way. They literally argue on television multiple times. We have clips and clips of Debbie Wasserman Schultz saying this is a fair process, this is an honest process, this is a fair we're giving everybody equal opportunity. We're not rigging it, we're not cheating. Because the truth is, if they would have come out and said that, then we actually would have not had a case. Because if you choose to continue to give money, knowing that something is rigged, then that's a different conversation.
Yeah, that's fraud and the inducement. Fraud and the inducement is a criminal act. And when you're talking about inducing, I don't know how many plaintiffs there were and how many people are in the class, but you're talking about tens of thousands of people. Each one is an individual felony. And so, and on top of that, you guys sought treble damages, which means we want our $258 million, and then we want $774 million punitive damages on top of that. So more than $1 billion.
Yeah. And this is something to look at really quickly.
The courts got that so wrong. Sorry. Go ahead, Father.
They did.
No, I was just going to say this is something to look at. Ranked choice voting is not going to fix this. New York mayor's race, and this is New York Times, ladies and gentlemen, in chaos after election board counts 135,000 test ballots. So ranked choice voting isn't going to fix stuff when you have avenues just like this, when you have mass mail-out ballots, and you have ways to keep people on these lists for quite some time. The metrics in Arizona and Nevada is pretty much if you voted in an election in the last 12 years, you automatically get a ballot in certain states. You automatically get a ballot sent out to you. I think in Arizona that was the law. So there will be a ballot, and in this system, you don't have to create a voter. You just have to create a ballot. And there's so many test ballots that got into the machine. And you know what they did? The good old, it wouldn't matter in any ways. It wouldn't have affected the results. So we're going to leave it be and go on with our very own life. And that's what we have in America when it comes to elections. And it's really disappointing. Let's put a bow on this section right away. I think a lot of people were they have had their "I told you so" moment. Why are you running in the Democratic Party, RFK? Why did you think it was going to be any different? In this particular situation, maybe there's some hope. Maybe he's going to walk. I think the libertarians should be ringing the phone, say, "Hey, RFK, how you doing? You look pretty buff there. We got ballot access all over the place there. Why don't you come run as a leftist libertarian? You share a lot of our values. We don't agree on a lot of things, but we'll take you in."
So I actually don't want him to walk.
What's that, Don?
I don't want him to walk.
You don't,
because not yet.
Yeah,
because my thing is, if you're going to be, you already made the decision, which we can debate whether or not it's a good or bad decision. I would obviously never have. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't suggest anybody do it. But you're already here, right? But not only are you here, but you're in a weirdly unique position where everyone has to acknowledge how much of a threat you are, because really you're the only one that has a chance to beat Biden in a primary where we don't know if Biden's going to make it to the goddamn ballot box. We don't know if he's going to make it, literally. And we don't know if whoever comes next has a chutzpah or the charisma to beat RFK Jr. So if he gets it's different when you're cheating for somebody, and that was the plan from the very beginning, and everyone is on the same page. But Newsom and his people, they have different interests. AOC and her clique, they have different interests. Kamala and her clique, they have different interests. All the new names that they're throwing out here, yeah, they're all part of the same Democrats, but they all have different ambitions and they have different cliques. That makes them at least exposable, at best beatable. Because of that, because that level of coordination can only come when you have a Hillary or a Biden. That's why they didn't just anoint Kamala, because you can't do that with the massive amount of coordination. Everyone has to know they're going to get paid. Basically, everybody has to know they're going to get taken care of. It's like whenever the mafia comes to your neighborhood, they're going to offer you some protection, right? Everybody got to get broken off. There's no guarantee that with any of the candidates outside of Biden that they are all going to get broken off. So I think that RFK would be smart to wait and see what happens, holding them accountable all the way, which we did not get from Bernie. We got that from Tulsi, but Tulsi was never as popular, at least, according to the polls, then as RFK is right now, while you have Biden sliding.
Don based, if Thursday they come through with these rules and they say, oh, you can't step foot in friggin' New Hampshire, otherwise you lose delegates in Georgia. Should RFK stick around? Go ahead.
Well, first of all, he doesn't have to go to New Hampshire to campaign there. He's already known there. So if he's interviewed in Boston by New Hampshire television, for example, he and Biden, Biden's got the Easter Bunny sitting next to him, whispering in his ear. RFK's, just talking the stuff he's talking. I've said to you a million times, Pasta, that I don't see the election in the same terms that people do. I don't think, and you admit it, Nick, starting with the vote counting part, even if there's a candidate that is going to do the things they promise and the things I want, and I vote for them, that doesn't mean that vote's going to get counted that way. And so that's the firewall they've got up front. But I don't even conceive of it in a way where I'm going to vote somebody in to change the system, because the system won't do that. And so I'm looking, though, at what's the value of this presidential election. And I think, if you look at the condition of the people in the United States and the role the United States is playing in the world, we're at a moment where they would call it a pre-revolutionary condition if the people were prepared for a revolution, but they're not. The political culture, the level of political consciousness of the people in the United States is not up to the task, nor is the leadership of basically the opposition. Bobby Kennedy and Donald Trump running a year-long or year-and-a-half-long campaign on television would do more to elevate. I mean, people have already lost, the system's lost legitimacy in the eyes of almost the entire electorate. And of course, the people that are not part of the electorate, they're already there because they don't believe the system is fixable by voting. I think if you were to give form and substance to that feeling and sentiment that people have, I know things aren't right. I can't afford to feed my family. I'm in eviction or foreclosure. My kid's got $100,000 worth of debt. I'm not making enough money, and this isn't going to change. No matter who I vote for, it just gets worse. It's one thing when people are in that condition, they believe it's them or bad luck or whatever. When they hear it in the public discussion that this is a condition facing everyone, they recognize a systemic nature. And when you hear people saying the system is rigged, the agencies are captured, the CIA's job is to make war and profit for arms companies, people start to grasp intellectually what they know emotionally. And I think that campaign would move the people forward more than any single thing I can think of that could be done between now and next election day.
I would say that even beyond that, like just to add on to it, I don't even think it would be grasping intellectually. I think they need to grasp it instinctually. That the problem is that there is an instinct that we are conditioned at birth, at least in this country, that our government may mess up, but they want the best for us, right? Mm-hmm. People, they believe that, and everyone knows the government is corrupt. They're like, yeah, but like that's people, right? Because every day they're working with people, humans that they see, oh yeah, he does some messed up stuff, but they're trying, or they're, he kind of makes mistakes, but he's not a bad guy. They don't understand that the government would literally like to see you die. They like, it would be easier for them if you were dead. Like they need you for your votes, they need you for your consumption. But once you can no longer provide, if you're refusing to vote for anybody and participate in the two-party system that legitimizes the duopoly, and then you don't have any money to spend, it is literally easier for you to be dead in the eyes of the government. Yeah. And people don't feel that instinctually, and therefore they don't have the visceral reaction of "fuck this, I'm flipping the table." They feel it
him
emotionally.
Staying in there could maybe bring it to a point where they could flip this table over. And I think I'm for that too. I do think my bias is towards my libertarian values of freedom of speech, freedom of the press, anti-interventionism. Want to see that third party in that third discussion there, but
he doesn't have.
Is that a libertarian value?
I'm a civil liberties guy.
I'm asking. You know that I know that the goalposts keep moving all over the world. Like I'm just asking genuinely.
He doesn't have.
I mean, I'm a civil liberties guy, right? You know. Are you asking
it was
why or RFK?
I'm not gonna lie. I was like, hold up, libertarian. I mean, it's cool.
No, me or RFK?
No, because you said I'm just like, partial to my libertarian values, the freedom of speech.
Well, I've always been a civil liberties guy. I've always been an anti-interventionist. I think there's a crossover between that Rage Against the War Machine rally, which showed where we have a lot in common. That's why I think there's a place for him to run on that party's ticket because of their freedom of speech, freedom of the press. I mean, freedom of speech is the most important thing, and I really value my civil liberties. However, the core of the capitalist mentality, which the Libertarian Party holds so dearly, I'm totally against because I do believe in social entities and all those other things. But
I got to bring up this grievance though. RFK can't be talking about freedom of speech and all that good shit whenever we know Israel literally makes one phone call to Washington and they get anybody shut down if they feel like it on social media, on TV, whatever. So like I'm going to continue to say I support a lot of RFK's policies. I actually think that RFK, he's one of the people that I can say, okay, I have a genuine disagreement with him, but I think he's a good person. I really believe that. But this whole what do you say? His very specific wording when it came to Israel is like
it wasn't unconditionally he supports
unconditional.
Israel.
Yeah, that
unconditionally. Yeah.
Bruh, first of all, we don't need to have unconditional loyalty to a goddamn thing. We are a sovereign nation. Like, well, allegedly, we're a sovereign nation. We don't have unconditional loyalty to a single ally, period, that have actually helped us with anything. Like genuinely helped us. We can survive with or without Israel. So that unconditional loyalty, just from a perspective of game theory, doesn't even make sense. But it also, from I know this, I guess, a little bit conspiratorial, but it also lets you know just how much shadow influence Israel has and how much of a problem they actually are. Because they dragged his ass out into the street and said, tell everybody how much you love us.
Yeah.
Like, what? Like, why is this even necessary, bro? Like, this issue, unfortunately, is not even that important to the majority of the country. Like, that's the reality of it. Like,
that is
I wish
reality.
It should be. Yeah. But it was like, what they were telling him to do, it wasn't for the rest of the country. That's what people think. They're like, oh, it's for the average person. Average person probably doesn't even care that we're having this conversation. It would have zero impact on whether or not they vote for JFK or RFK, excuse me. But what it does signal is to the donors and the powers that be that the U.S. will still be in business with Israel. That's who they're dragging RFK out to talk to when he in virtual signatories. So
that's the scary part, right? It's not just the suffering of the Palestinian brothers and sisters who are under just fucking hostile attacks. It's the fact that RFK is signaling to, oh, I know who the bosses are, and he's always going to be loyal to the bosses at the end of the day. A lot of people look at that and say, oh my God. However, you did point out one important factor, Niko, and that's that the normies will not even pay attention to it. It's not even on their radar, foreign policy, let alone Israel-Palestine. So it's not going to affect him in the long run where he does have issues in the populist mentality, which a lot of people are behind, including COVID protocols, which are very, very important. And unfortunately, that has been missed by Cornel West. And we'll get into that. But Don, do you have to leave right now or do you want to stay for the next section, buddy?
Yeah, let me just put a button on this because I got
to.
First of all, Kennedy doesn't have to make his mind up about running as a libertarian or some other ballot status party, if there is one, including the Greens, if that's how it plays out. They can carry petitions when it's time to do that for a candidate, and then they have a device in New York. It's called, a committee to fill vacancies. You have a nominee that you carry signatures for, and then they step aside inside a window in whatever the window is in a particular state, and the committee says, now this person is actually going to be our candidate. So the carrying of the petition really secures a ballot space, and that ballot space can be filled by the party at a pretty late date in the process. I think he's got the room to conduct pretty much straight through Super Tuesday, a campaign as a Democrat in the primaries, so to take an assessment of what to do next. And there's nothing I think can stop him from working on both tracks, sort of on the QT as it gets late in the primary process. And even, I don't know about the QT part, because this is something, if I were the candidate, I would use to leverage. I mean, you can leverage with that.
Depends on the state, but it depends on the state.
If you're gonna make Biden through trickery the candidate, that I'm gonna run, and then Trump is gonna win. And that may matter to the rest of you, but fuck all you all. I don't care. That game. This is the game I wish Ralph Nader played in 2000. Instead of saying it wasn't me, I would have been, yeah, it was me.
Hell yeah, it was me.
I'm doing it every time from now on until you sit down and do what I'm telling you. That's how you will part power at the margins, Yeah.
And he already came out and said that he wouldn't that he's not endorsing Biden. He already made that explicitly clear.
I'm sorry, he's not going to endorse anybody.
Not endorsing Biden,
yeah. He said I'm running. He said I'm not looking any further than that. But once he's not running a Democratic, and the thing about Israel, look, and you said game theory, okay? You're running in a Democratic primary. If that's a major issue, you said something too nice about Palestine or whatever, you're not running in a Democratic primary. You might as well go home now and start carrying libertarian petitions or whatever. You're done. That's how that works.
Yeah. And
there are states where that can hurt you in the margins. Where you have entire community like New York, you can lose New York over Israel Palestine in one form or another. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You can lose Florida over New York, Israel, Palestine too, as well. Big swing state.
It's like it could go out exactly. It could go either way. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And this is something that has to be mentioned because Jessica Ma in the chat said, didn't JFK or RFK piss off Israel right before one was killed? It was JFK. And it was David Ben-Gurion, where he was telling them he couldn't test nuclear weapons. And there are letters between David Ben-Gurion, that they had read and they had looked and they had said that they were going to get back at JFK because JFK forced him to resign. And he was very close with the mob, David Ben-Gurion, with Meyer Lansky, very close with the Mossad. And there was a lot of talk that the Mossad was one of the reasons they whacked JFK. Just to get your tinfoil hat conspiracy theory in there. RFK also has to deal with that, and that's something that people don't ever equate into the factor on why he might be playing this game. Because I don't even believe he's honest about it.
Yeah, I'm like, and to be real about it, like as much as he seemed like he effusively supports Israel, and I get it, but he's also very open and honest. Like, yep, I'm fully aware the CIA killed my family, guys. Just letting everybody know. It is not a question in my mind who killed my dad and my uncle. So it is like, what was interesting about it was almost every time after he went on one of these little pro-Israel tours, it was immediately followed by a conversation about how he was totally aware that his family was killed by the CIA. Yeah, so it's like, I know that's cute.
But he drives it home even more than that. I saw my father call the head of the CIA after my uncle was killed and say, "Did you do that?" It's not even I'm that crazy guy processing this stuff. I saw it. He was in 1963, he was 9 years old. And he remembers. I would remember it too, I think.
That's a pretty intense, Yeah.
On Debar, everybody.
I try to be sympathetic because he once again, it's like when I said he's not signaling the work to the country, like the voters, like that's once again, unfortunately, mostly an irrelevant issue outside of maybe donations in a couple of districts. He's signaling to the people who can make a phone call and have that trigger pulled.
Yep. Because
they're aware of how much of a threat that he could potentially be. Because he actually has better policies and he's better at conveying them than even Bernie in some cases.
Yeah, lots of
I like his he's very good on actually he's anti-war on drugs and war on crime, right? Like his healthcare is like, but like I don't really feel like health is going to be fixed in the States, so it is what it is. Like he is for the most part very anti-war. The Ukraine situation, and then of course the pandemic, like the vaccine issue, is probably the issue of our lifetime, because we know it involves not just domestic policies and pandemic policies, it's domestic policy, pandemic policy, foreign policy, international relations, potentially CIA, PSYOP, big pharma, like everything that we care about, freedom of speech, all that stuff is tied into this particular issue, and he's the best on it.
Yeah.
So I got, like I said, I like RFK, especially as a person. He's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And that issue, I try not to let it sour me too much, because, like, once again, when you have your uncle and your father killed, you know exactly who did it, and then you're watching in real time as no one's held accountable for it. It can scare you a little bit.
I think he's got a heart just for running and coming out of the gate saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to do what my uncle started: take out that operations section of the CIA and scatter it to the four winds." That's a lot of heart. I'm sorry.
That's true.
Listen, guys, we could talk about this all day, but I want to get on to another section.
Yeah,
I know I got limited time with Niko's.
Don
Don DeBased, everybody. Let everybody know where they can find you real quick.
Yeah. Then I want to point people to something on the subject of RFK. His father wrote a book, a memoir, 13 Days, that details what was happening during the so-called Cuban Missile Crisis in considerable detail. It's highly relevant to what's going on in Ukraine right now in terms of guessing whether or not we're going to have another near miss or an actual nuclear war. And if you go to my blog, which is dondebar.blogspot.com, it's right there. Then there's two pieces there about the echoes of 1962 that are basically just citations from that book that talk to specific points that are relevant to what's going on in Ukraine right now. And I'd really like it if you could take the time to take a quick look at this, because it'll help you understand what's going on in front of your eyes a lot quicker. And we don't have much time to play around anymore.